Depression is associated with all sorts of negative beliefs that often serve to feed back into the depression and make a person feel even worse. This is often referred to as the cognitive triad, in which a person experiences overly negative, distorted beliefs about themselves, the world, and the future more generally. And in a previous video, I talked about 6 common negative beliefs about the self that can contribute to a person feeling even more depressed. And so today's video, we're going to be focusing on the next part of the triad, which is 5 negative or unhelpful beliefs about the world and other people. And the first common negative belief that I want to talk about is the notion that life is fair. This is often referred to as the just world hypothesis, which at its core suggests that life and the world operates in a fair and just way. So this is the notion of hard work leads to success, while laziness results in a person failing. It assumes that if I'm kind and caring towards other people, they will reciprocate with kindness towards me. It also assumes that people will judge me based on my character and my accomplishments, rather than my background or appearance. There's some comfort in believing that this notion that life is fair. The problem with this belief is that, unfortunately, it's just not true. As much as we all wish that the world was a fair and just place, it just isn't. And if you hold on to the idea that life is fair or that good things happen to good people, think about the implication of what that means when bad things happen. If I believe that life is fair and something negative happens to me, what's the conclusion that I can take away from that? It might lead me to believe that I must have done something wrong to deserve the negative outcome, or that in some way I'm being punished for some previous mistakes or wrongdoings that I've done in the past. This way of thinking can result in feelings of guilt because I start to believe that I must have done something wrong to deserve this negative thing that happened. So the key is to remember that no one ever said that life was fair. And so part of this is coming to an acceptance of the fact that life and the world isn't always fair. And when bad things happen, it doesn't mean that the bad things occurred because we're being punished for something we did, or that we deserve the bad thing to have happened. Another common belief about the world is that it's simply easier to avoid life's problems than to face them head on. And you often see this in people who have anxiety alongside their depression. You see, the thing is that problems in and of themselves can cause a person to experience a lot of anxiety, especially when the solution to the problem isn't immediately obvious. Because if the solution were obvious, then it wouldn't be a problem. But it's the uncertainty about not knowing what to do, which causes a person to experience anxiety or stress about making the wrong choice. And a lot of times when I bring this belief up with my clients, they often respond with, I don't believe that. I know it's not true. But the follow-up question I always have is, do your actions actually reflect that you don't believe this to be true? Think about the past few weeks or months. Have there been any times when you've procrastinated dealing with challenges by telling yourself, I'll think about that later, or I'll get to it eventually, but then it takes you a lot longer than you anticipated to actually deal with the challenge? The real problem with avoiding problems or challenges is what happens when we don't address problems when they come up. Have you ever noticed what happens to problems that you ignore? Do they disappear? Do they work themselves out on their own? Probably not. You probably notice that most problems that you don't deal with tend to grow and become more complicated, mushrooming and getting bigger and more overwhelming, which then makes it even more difficult and stressful to deal with. And then the temptation is to want to continue avoiding the problem because it's now so big and so overwhelming, but that only makes the situation worse and leads into one of those negative spirals that depression is so good at trapping people in. A third common negative belief about the world and other people is the notion that the way to be appreciated and to be accepted by other people is to constantly give of yourself. It's this idea that people will like me as long as I'm doing something for them. But it probably doesn't take much to recognize how this belief can become a problem pretty quickly. If we believe that people will only appreciate us for what we do for them, the subtle and implied message that we're telling ourselves is that we aren't worthy of being accepted and appreciated simply for who we are. Instead, what this belief implies is that it's only through giving to other people that I can gain their acceptance and affection. And if I ever stop giving of myself to other people, then they wouldn't want anything to do with me. This belief often stems from a deeper sense that we might not be worthy of love or that I'm inherently unlovable. The only way to feel like people care about me is by constantly doing things for them. And one of the ways of recognizing whether or not you hold this belief is to ask yourself, are you the one who always seems to be giving more in your relationships? Do you notice that a lot of your relationships aren't really reciprocal? You see, the thing is, it's kind of paradoxical. When I give too much of myself or find myself in unbalanced relationships, the other person may actually lose respect for me, particularly if they're looking for someone to be an equal partner. Most relationships are built on mutual give and take. If I'm always the person who's giving and the other person is always taking, it's not a foundation for a healthy or a sustainable relationship. So the key here is to respect yourself as much as you respect other people, and in doing so, you're much more likely to form deeper and more fulfilling connections that reward everyone involved. The next common faulty belief is similar in that it's a belief that I have to do everything that I'm asked to do by other people. It's similar to the idea that the way to be accepted by others is to always give, but in this case, it's more about feeling the need to respond and to comply with every request that's made of me. Now, it's important to recognize that being caring and responsive and wanting to help other people, that's not a bad thing. But if you hold the belief that you have to do everything that you're asked to do, what's happening is that you're allowing others to dictate what you're doing. You're essentially relying on other people to never ask you for anything unreasonable or to never ask you to do something that you don't want to do. So the problem with this belief is that it removes your ability to determine for yourself if a request is unreasonable. It removes your right to defend your boundaries or to say no to someone. Essentially, you're handing over control to the other person and feeling obligated to do whatever they ask of you. And what this does is it strips away a sense of personal agency, responsibility, or sense that I have control over my own actions. And this just results in me feeling helpless and not in control of my life. And on top of that, people who hold this belief often end up feeling angry or resentful towards the people who are asking them to do things. I might feel like I'm being used, but the other person may not even be aware of it. From the other person's perspective, I always agree to help, so they're likely to assume that I'm happy to help, which may not actually be the case. And so this dynamic can create unhealthy cycles in relationships where I experience unspoken frustration because I feel I always have to do whatever people ask of me, and that just leads to me feeling even more discouraged and depressed. And the fifth belief I want to talk about is the assumption that good relationships don't have significant problems. This is what I often refer to as the happily ever after myth. You see this depicted in TV shows and movies where couples live in harmony and any issues or problems that come up in their relationship get quickly resolved by the end of a 30-minute episode. Or they're neatly wrapped up by the time the movie credits roll as the happy couple walks hand in hand into the sunset. At the core of this belief is the assumption that if you've found the right partner, your relationship should be effortless and free of any challenges or problems. And therefore, if any problems come up, or if you find yourself having to put effort into maintaining the relationship, then what this means is that it's potentially a sign that maybe this isn't the right relationship for you. But it's also important to recognize that every long-term relationship takes work and effort and attention. There's There's no such thing as a relationship that runs on autopilot, where you meet someone, fall madly in love, and never have to think about it or work on the relationship ever again. The presence of conflict in a relationship or the need to put effort into maintaining a relationship doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong in the relationship. It simply means that your relationship is like every other relationship, with its ups and with its downs. It's important to remember that all relationships require some care and some nurturing, and to expect that problems will arise because problems occur in every relationship. The key is that in healthy relationships, you and your partner work together to address the challenges that come up. So, those are 5 common faulty assumptions about the world and other people. Life is fair, it's easier to avoid problems than to face them, you need to constantly give to other people to be accepted, you have to do everything that's ever asked of you, and that good relationships never have problems. So if you catch yourself thinking any of these faulty beliefs, or if you notice yourself behaving as if you believe some of these things, it's important to challenge those thoughts rather than getting caught up in the negative spiral traps that depression will set up for you. And if you want to learn more ways of recognizing these negative thinking patterns more quickly, I encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.